Journey into the blood-soaked sands of ancient Greece to witness the making of history's most feared warrior. Long before Achilles became a demigod whispered in terror across battlefields, he was flesh and bone, a boy haunted by prophecy, forged in secrecy, and destined to choose between a long-forgotten life and eternal glory drenched in his own blood. This is not the sanitized myth you were taught. This is the raw, visceral truth behind the legend. The brutal training that shattered his childhood, the impossible choice that defined his fate, and the mysteries that still echo from Bronze Age Greece to our modern world. Discover the warrior whose single absence could doom armies, whose rage could reshape wars, and whose name would become synonymous with both invincibility and tragic mortality. What if I told you that the greatest warrior who ever lived knew the exact day he would die, and charged into battle anyway? What drives a man to choose certain death over a peaceful life? To become so lethal that kings begged for his presence and enemies trembled at his name, yet so human that a single insult could bring entire armies to their knees? The warrior I'm about to reveal to you wasn't just skilled with a spear. He was a walking contradiction, invulnerable yet doomed, merciless yet capable of profound love, a killer sculpted by the gods themselves who would ultimately be destroyed by the tiniest, most human of weaknesses. His name was Achilles, and the true story of how he became the most feared man in the ancient world will shatter everything you thought you knew about heroes. Segment 1. Before the legend, life in the shadows. The Aegean wind cuts across Mount Pelion like a blade, carrying with it the scent of pine and the distant salt of the sea. This is Thessaly in the late Bronze Age, a land of rocky peaks, dense forests, and scattered kingdoms constantly teetering on the edge of war. The Mycenaean world is a patchwork of competing powers, each city-state guarded by massive cyclopean walls, each king jealously hoarding his treasures and his warriors. It is a time when gods walk among men, or so the people believe, when every storm might be divine anger and every victory a celestial gift. The earth itself seems harder here, less forgiving, as if the land knows that only the strong will survive what's coming. In the palace of Phthia, King Pelias paces the cold stone floors, his weathered hands clenched behind his back. He has married a goddess, Thetis, a nereid of the sea, but their union brings more dread than joy. The marriage was arranged by Zeus himself, driven by prophecy and divine politics that mortals can barely comprehend. Thetis does not love her mortal husband. She submits to this union as punishment, as cosmic necessity, her immortal nature chafing against the limitations of human life. When their son is born, Pelias names him Achilles, meaning he who has no lips to suckle, though others will later claim different origins for the name. The child is extraordinary from his first breath, his eyes too knowing, his cries too fierce, his tiny hands already grasping as if reaching for a weapon he doesn't yet possess. But Thetis knows something that fills her divine heart with terror. She has seen the threads of fate, glimpsed the pattern woven by the Moirai themselves. Her son will have two possible destinies. He can live a long, peaceful life, married with children, eventually dying old and forgotten in his bed. Or he can sail to war, achieve glory beyond measure, and die young with his name echoing through eternity. There is no middle path. There is no compromise. And Thetis, bound by a mother's love that transcends even divine nature, will do anything to cheat fate, to save her son from the doom she knows is coming. The goddess tries everything. In the dead of night, she takes the infant Achilles and holds him over sacred flames, burning away his mortal weakness, trying to make him invulnerable. She anoints him with ambrosia, the food of the gods, rubbing the divine substance into his skin until it glows with otherworldly light. Some versions of the tale claim she dipped him in the river Styx itself, holding him by one heel as the waters of the underworld washed over his body, making his skin impervious to bronze and iron alike. But one heel, the heel she gripped, remains vulnerable, untouched by the magical waters. A single point of mortality in an otherwise perfect weapon. Pelias discovers her one night, holding their son over the hearth flames, and his mortal terror breaks the spell. He tears the child away, screaming accusations of infanticide, unable to comprehend the divine logic behind his wife's actions. Thetis, her work incomplete, her son still partially mortal, abandons them both. She returns to her sisters beneath the waves, visiting only rarely, appearing from the surf like living foam to whisper warnings and prophecies to the son she could not fully save. Young Achilles grows up in a palace haunted by his mother's absence, raised by a father who loves him but fears him, who sees in those piercing eyes something not entirely human. The boy is different. Even as a toddler, Achilles runs faster than children twice his age. He never seems to tire. When he falls, he rises without tears, examining his scratches with curiosity rather than pain. The servants whisper that his blood runs golden, that he is half divine, that doom follows him like a shadow. Peleus watches his son grow with increasing dread, knowing that such gifts come with a price. The prophecy hangs over them like a storm cloud that never breaks, glory or obscurity, eternal fame or peaceful oblivion. There is no other path. When Achilles reaches the age of 6, Peleus makes a decision that will shape everything that follows. He cannot keep his son in the palace, protected and soft. If the boy is to survive, if he is to have any chance of choosing the longer life over glorious death, he must be made harder, stronger, wiser than any normal prince. Peleus sends his son away to Mount Pelion, to be trained by the centaur Chiron, the wisest and most skilled teacher in all of Greece. It is an exile disguised as education, a father's desperate attempt to prepare his son for a fate he prays will never come. Mount Pelion in winter is a place of absolute brutality. Snow lies thick on the ground, and the wind howls through the pines with a sound like distant screaming. Chiron's cave offers little comfort: smoke-blackened stone, animal skins for warmth, a fire that never quite drives away the cold. The centaur himself is ancient beyond reckoning, his horse body scarred from countless battles, his human torso still powerful despite his age. His eyes hold a sadness that comes from training heroes, knowing that most of them will die young and violently. He has taught Jason, who will lead the Argonauts. He has instructed Asclepius, who will become the greatest healer. And now he has Achilles, the most gifted and most doomed of them all. The training begins before dawn and continues until darkness makes it too dangerous to wield weapons. Chiron teaches the boy everything, not just warfare, but medicine, music, philosophy, hunting. Achilles learns to identify healing herbs in the forest, to set broken bones, to draw poison from wounds. He learns to play the lyre, his small fingers coaxing haunting melodies from the strings, giving his warrior's heart an outlet for the gentler emotions that will plague him. He studies the stars, learning to navigate by their positions, understanding the movements of celestial bodies that the gods themselves have placed in the heavens. And he hunts, tracking deer through the snow, stalking boar through the underbrush, learning patience and silence, and the precise moment to strike. But the physical training is relentless, merciless. Chiron works the boy until he collapses, then pushes him to rise and continue. They run through the mountain forest for hours, Achilles' legs burning, his lungs screaming, learning to push past the point where normal men would stop. They wrestle in the mud and snow, the centaur teaching holds and breaks, and the 1,000 ways a smaller warrior can defeat a larger opponent. They practice with wooden weapons until Achilles' hands bleed, until the spear becomes an extension of his arm, until the sword moves faster than conscious thought can follow. Chiron introduces him to pain deliberately, methodically. A cut here, a burn there, teaching the boy's body to understand damage and continue fighting through it. He makes Achilles sleep in the snow, training his flesh to endure cold that would kill lesser men. He forces him to go days without food, then makes him fight while weak with hunger, teaching him that battles are won by whoever can function longest past the point of exhaustion. It is brutal pedagogy, designed not to create a warrior, but to forge a weapon in human form. The other students, princes and nobles sent for Chiron's teaching, fear Achilles. He defeats boys twice his age in combat exercises. He runs faster, strikes harder, endures longer. But there is something else, something that unsettles them more than his physical prowess. Even as a child, Achilles has a coldness in battle, a capacity for violence that seems disconnected from his otherwise passionate nature. When he fights, something predatory emerges, something that makes the other boys step back and wonder what kind of creature shares their training ground. Yet at night, when the training ends, Achilles sits by the fire and plays his lyre, singing songs that Chiron has taught him, melodies that speak of heroes and tragedies, of loves that transcend death, of the weight of fate. His voice, not yet broken into manhood, carries through the mountain darkness, beautiful and terrible, a reminder that this killing machine is also a boy who understands poetry, who feels deeply, who is not yet hardened beyond redemption. Chiron watches him during these moments and feels his ancient heart break with foreknowledge. He knows what's coming. He has seen the patterns before. The most gifted students, the ones who excel at everything, are always claimed by war. They burn too brightly to last, like stars that explode into supernovas, blazing across the heavens before vanishing into darkness. Achilles is the brightest of them all, and therefore doomed to the shortest, most spectacular existence. The boy asks questions that reveal his unusual understanding. Why do men fight? What makes glory worth dying for? If we all end up in Hades regardless of our deeds, what difference does fame make? Chiron answers honestly, teaching philosophy alongside swordsmanship, trying to give Achilles the wisdom to choose his own path when the time comes. But deep down, the centaur knows the choice is already made. Some men are born for peace. Achilles was born for war. Years pass on the mountain. The boy becomes a young man, his body hardening into something magnificent and terrible. By 14, he can defeat grown warriors in single combat. By 16, he moves through combat forms with a grace that seems choreographed by the gods themselves. His speed is legendary. Other students swear they see him in two places at once, that his spear moves faster than the human eye can track. His strength is prodigious, capable of wielding weapons that should require both hands with casual one-handed ease. But more than physical prowess, Achilles possesses something rarer, a perfect union of instinct and intellect in battle, knowing where his enemy will strike before they move, positioning himself in the exact spot to deliver the killing blow. Chiron knows the training is nearly complete. Soon, messengers will come from Phthia. Soon, the world's desperate need for warriors will reach even this remote mountain refuge. Soon, Achilles will face the choice his mother feared, the fork in the road that will determine whether he lives long and forgotten or dies young and eternal. The centaur can do nothing but prepare him for both paths and pray to gods he knows aren't listening that somehow, impossibly, the boy will choose life over glory. But in his heart, Chiron knows. He has seen the fire in Achilles' eyes when they speak of great warriors, the hunger in his expression when tales of battle are recounted. He has watched the young man practice with his weapons not as exercises, but as devotions, a priest at the altar of his own potential. Achilles doesn't just want to be a warrior. He needs it the way other men need air. The choice was never really a choice at all. Late at night, when Achilles sleeps, Chiron stands at the cave entrance and looks down the mountain toward the distant kingdoms of men. Somewhere out there, ships are being built. Alliances are being forged. A war is brewing that will consume a generation and make legends of those who survive it, and martyrs of those who don't. And when that call comes, when the messengers arrive seeking warriors for an impossible war against an impregnable city, Achilles will answer. Not because he must, but because every fiber of his being was created for exactly that moment. The centaur returns to the cave, to the sleeping form of his greatest student, and whispers a prayer to Thetis, wherever she dwells beneath the waves. Protect him if you can. Grant him wisdom along with his terrible gifts. And when the end comes, as it must, as it always does for men like him, let it at least be glorious enough to justify the shortness of his years. But the only answer is the wind through the pines and the crackling of the dying fire. Sounds that have witnessed the training of heroes for generations. Sounds that will continue long after Achilles' name has become legend, and legend has faded into myth. Segment 2. Rise of the Warrior, the Path to Glory. The summons arrives on a spring morning when Achilles is 19 years old, already a warrior of terrible reputation despite never having fought in a real war. Messengers from Agamemnon, High King of Mycenae, climb Mount Pelion seeking warriors for an expedition unlike any before. Paris, Prince of Troy, has stolen Helen, wife of Menelaus, and the kings of Greece are assembling an armada to reclaim her and punish Troy for this unprecedented insult. They need warriors. They need heroes. And whispers have reached them of a youth on Mount Pelion who moves like lightning and fights like a god. But there is a complication, a twist of fate that nearly changes everything. Thetis has learned of the war, and she knows with divine certainty that if Achilles sails to Troy, he will never return. In desperation, she convinces Peleus to hide their son, to conceal him where the recruiters cannot find him. Achilles is sent in secret to the court of King Lycomedes on the island of Skyros, disguised as a girl and hidden among the king's daughters. It is a humiliating exile for a warrior of his caliber, a denial of everything he has trained for. But Thetis is willing to sacrifice her son's pride to save his life. For months, Achilles lives in women's quarters, wearing dresses, learning to move and speak as a girl. He is called Pyrrha, the red-haired one. And the deception holds because who would imagine that the greatest warrior in Greece could be hidden in plain sight among princesses? But the disguise chafes worse than any physical wound. At night, Achilles practices sword forms in secret, his movements constrained by unfamiliar clothing, his warrior's spirit suffocating under layers of fabric and falsehood. He feels his skills eroding, his edge dulling, everything Chiron built in him going soft with disuse. Then Odysseus arrives. Clever Odysseus, king of Ithaca, the most cunning of all the Greek commanders. He has heard rumors of Thetis hiding her son, and he suspects where the missing warrior might be. But he cannot simply demand that Lycomedes produce Achilles. That would insult the king and possibly cause diplomatic complications. So Odysseus devises a test, a trap disguised as entertainment. He arrives at Lycomedes' court as a merchant, bearing gifts for the royal daughters, beautiful jewelry, fine fabrics, cosmetics, and perfumes, all the things that delight young noble women. But hidden among these feminine treasures, he has placed weapons, a sword with a blade that catches the light, a spear perfectly balanced, a shield with Gorgon emblems. The girls are invited to examine the merchandise, to choose whatever pleases them. Achilles tries to resist. He reaches for a bracelet, forces himself to admire a bolt of silk, but his eyes keep returning to the weapons. His fingers itch to grip the sword hilt. And when Odysseus suddenly signals his men to blow war trumpets, creating the illusion of an attack, instinct overrides deception. While the real princesses scream and flee, Pyrrha seizes the sword and spear, drops into a combat stance, and positions herself to defend against the imagined threat. The movement is too perfect, too practiced, too unmistakably that of a trained warrior. Odysseus smiles. Found you. When the deception is revealed, Achilles feels not shame, but overwhelming relief. The pretense is over. The hiding is finished. He can finally become what he was always meant to be. But before he agrees to join the expedition, Achilles demands a private audience with Odysseus. In the throne room of Skyros, with King Lycomedes nervously watching, the young warrior makes his terms clear. He will come to Troy. He will fight for Agamemnon. But he will bring his own men, the Myrmidons, the legendary warriors of Phthia, who fight with ant-like discipline and ferocity. And he will bring Patroclus. Patroclus. The name carries weight that Odysseus immediately understands. Patroclus is Achilles' closest companion, sent to Chiron's mountain years ago after accidentally killing another boy in a dispute. The two have been inseparable since childhood, training together, fighting together, sharing everything. Their bond runs deeper than brotherhood, more complex than simple friendship. In later years, poets will debate the exact nature of their relationship: lovers, brothers, companions in arms. But what matters is this: Achilles will not go to war without Patroclus. He will not face death without the one person who understands him completely. Odysseus agrees. How can he refuse? The expedition needs Achilles more than Achilles needs the expedition. Every oracle, every prophecy, every augury agrees. Without Achilles, Troy will not fall. With him, victory is possible, even if not certain. So the terms are accepted, and Achilles returns to Phthia to gather his Myrmidons and prepare for war. But before he leaves Skyros, something unexpected happens. One of King Lycomedes' daughters, Deidamia, comes to him in the night. She has known his secret for weeks, she says. She watched him practice sword forms when he thought no one was looking. She saw the warrior beneath the disguise. And she loves him, not the false girl Pyrrha, but the real man she glimpsed beneath the deception. They spend one night together, a single night of passion before Achilles sails away forever. He doesn't know, as he boards the ship for Phthia, that he has left behind a son, Neoptolemus, who will grow up never knowing his father, who will one day have to finish the war Achilles begins. The gathering at Aulis is unlike anything the world has seen. Over 1,000 ships, black-hulled and deadly, pulled up on the beaches. Tens of thousands of warriors, Greeks, Achaeans, Argives, Danaans, all assembled under Agamemnon's command. Kings and princes from every corner of Hellas, Odysseus of Ithaca, Ajax son of Telamon, Diomedes of Argos, Menelaus of Sparta, Nestor of Pylos with his wisdom of 3 generations. And among them, Achilles arrives with 50 ships of Myrmidons, warriors trained to fight in perfect synchronization, to show no mercy, to follow their leader into death itself, if necessary. The other warriors watch Achilles with a mixture of awe and resentment. He is younger than most of them, arrogant, unwilling to defer to Agamemnon's supreme authority. He sets up his camp slightly apart from the others, establishes his own command structure, makes it clear that while he fights for Greece, he bows to no king. Agamemnon bristles at this independence, but needs him too desperately to enforce obedience. An uneasy alliance forms, held together by mutual necessity and the promise of glory. But the fleet cannot sail. The winds are wrong, blowing constantly from the north, pinning the ships at Aulis for weeks that stretch into months. Supplies run low. Men grow restless. Fights break out between warriors of different kingdoms. And the priests whisper that the goddess Artemis is angry, that she demands a sacrifice before she will grant favorable winds. They say Agamemnon has offended her, that only the blood of his daughter Iphigenia will appease divine wrath. Achilles is present when Iphigenia arrives, told she is coming to Aulis to marry Achilles himself, a political marriage to seal alliances before the war. He sees the girl's excitement, her innocence, completely unaware that she is being brought to her death. When the truth is revealed, when Agamemnon prepares to sacrifice his own daughter for favorable winds, Achilles is one of the few who protests. He argues against it, calls it barbarism, offers to defend the girl if necessary. But he is overruled by necessity and prophecy. The expedition is more important than one life, even an innocent one. Iphigenia dies on the altar, and the winds change. The sacrifice haunts Achilles as the fleet finally sails. He has not yet killed anyone in this war, but already the cost feels unbearable. What kind of glory justifies the murder of innocents? What kind of victory is worth a father sacrificing his daughter? These questions will plague him throughout the coming years, even as he racks up the highest kill count of any warrior in Greece. The voyage to Troy takes weeks. The fleet stops at various islands, raids coastal settlements for supplies, encounters resistance that gives Achilles his first real combat experience of the war. On the island of Tenedos, he fights his first significant battle, leading a raid against forces loyal to Troy. This is where the legend truly begins, where warriors see firsthand what Chiron has created. Achilles doesn't just fight. He dances through combat like performance art, his spear moving too fast to follow, finding gaps in armor that shouldn't exist, killing with an efficiency that seems supernatural. He never seems to tire. He never retreats. When other men would be exhausted, covered in blood and gasping for breath, Achilles moves with the same fluid grace as when the battle began. His Myrmidons follow him with fanatical devotion, and together they cut through enemy formations like a blade through water. But it's not just his skill that terrifies his enemies. It's his rage. When Achilles enters battle fury, something primal emerges. He doesn't just kill, he annihilates. He pursues fleeing enemies with relentless savagery. He refuses to take prisoners who might be worth ransom, cutting them down instead with cold efficiency. After his first battle, his armor is so drenched in blood that it looks black, and his eyes hold a light that makes even his own men uncomfortable. Patroclus sees it and worries. Late at night in their tent, he watches Achilles clean his weapons with obsessive care and sees the distance in his friend's eyes, as if part of him never left the battlefield. Patroclus understands what's happening. Achilles is becoming the weapon he was trained to be, the human spear that Chiron forged on Mount Pelion. But weapons don't have souls. Weapons don't love or dream or play the lyre. Patroclus fears that his friend is losing his humanity piece by piece with every battle, trading it for the glory he was promised. When the fleet finally reaches Troy, the sight steals the breath from even veteran warriors. The city rises on its hill like a mountain itself, walls of massive stone blocks fitted together with impossible precision, towers reaching toward the sky. This is Ilios, Priam's city, one of the richest and most powerful in all the world. Its walls have never been breached. Its wealth is legendary. And now, because of one woman and one prince's decision, all the might of Greece has come to tear it down. The Greeks established their camp on the beach, pulling their ships onto the sand, building walls and trenches, preparing for what everyone knows will be a long siege. Troy is too strong to fall quickly. This will be a war of years, not months, a grinding attrition that will consume a generation. But on that first day, when the armies face each other across the plain between the Greek camp and Trojan walls, something changes in Achilles. He sees the enemy assembled, Hector leading them, Troy's greatest defender, along with countless other warriors. And he feels not fear, but exhilaration. This is why he was born. This is the purpose all that training served. He will fight here. He will kill here. And he will become immortal. The first clash is chaos. Thousands of men colliding in clouds of dust, bronze against bronze, the screaming of wounded, the celebration of victors. Chariots race across the plain, archers darken the sky with arrows, warriors engage in single combat, while their comrades fight and die around them. And through it all moves Achilles, a storm in human form, his spear finding targets with every thrust, his shield turning aside blows that would kill lesser men. He kills 12 Trojan warriors in that first battle, men whose names will be forgotten, but whose deaths establish Achilles as something more than human. But the real moment, the moment when his legend crystallizes, comes when he faces Cycnus, son of Poseidon, a warrior supposedly invulnerable to weapons, whose skin cannot be pierced by blade or spear point. The two meet on the field, and the Greeks watch with held breath as Achilles' spear glances off Cycnus' chest, unable to penetrate. For a moment, doubt flickers. If Achilles cannot harm Cycnus, what does that mean for his supposed invincibility? Then Achilles drops his spear and attacks with his bare hands. He wrestles Cycnus to the ground, gets behind him, and uses the straps of his own helmet to strangle him. He chokes the life from a supposedly invulnerable warrior, proving that there is always a way to kill, always a weakness to exploit. When Cycnus stops moving, Achilles stands over the body and roars his challenge to the Trojan army. Send me your heroes. Send me your best. I will kill them all. It is a promise he will spend the next 9 years fulfilling. Battle after battle, raid after raid, Achilles racks up kills that become legendary. He sacks 12 cities by sea and 11 by land, coastal settlements, tributary states, allies of Troy. Everywhere he goes, he leaves devastation. His myrmidons become synonymous with death. His name becomes a weapon itself. Cities surrender at news of his approach. Warriors flee rather than face him. He kills Troilus, youngest son of Priam, ambushing the boy at a fountain and butchering him despite his youth. He kills Hector's son in some versions of the tale, showing no mercy even to children of his enemies. He captures women and makes them slaves, including Briseis, daughter of a priest of Apollo, who will become the catalyst for his greatest crisis. He becomes everything Chiron trained him to be and worse. Not just a warrior, but a force of nature, relentless and pitiless. Yet in the Greek camp, in the quiet moments between battles, Achilles remains somehow separate from the brutality he embodies. He plays his lyre and sings songs of heroes past. He sits with Patroclus and discusses philosophy, poetry, the meaning of existence. He questions the war, wonders aloud if Helen is worth this ocean of blood, doubts the wisdom of Agamemnon's leadership. He is two people, the thoughtful young man trained by Chiron and the killing machine unleashed on Troy. And the conflict between these selves tears at him. 9 years pass. 9 years of battles, of deaths, of small victories that bring the Greeks no closer to breaching Troy's walls. Achilles becomes the most feared warrior in the world, his armor drenched in so much blood that the bronze seems permanently stained. He has killed more men than he can count, avenged insults real and imagined, proven himself worthy of every prophecy. But he has not yet claimed the ultimate glory. He has not yet faced Hector in single combat. He has not yet fulfilled the destiny that will cost him everything. That moment is coming. Everyone knows it. The war is building towards something apocalyptic, a confrontation that will reshape everything. And at the center of it all is Achilles, the warrior who chose glory over life, who decided that a short existence blazing with fame was worth more than a long one fading into obscurity. He has made his choice. Now he will discover what that choice truly costs. Segment 3. Myths, Secrets, and Unsolved Mysteries. There exists, deep in the vaults of the British Museum, a fragment of pottery dated to approximately 520 BCE. On its surface, faded but still visible, is an image of a warrior holding another warrior's body, both rendered in the red figure technique that defined classical Greek ceramics. No names are inscribed, but scholars agree. This is Achilles cradling the dead Patroclus. What makes this fragment extraordinary is not its artistry, but its antiquity. Created nearly 7 centuries after the Trojan War supposedly occurred, yet already treating Achilles as ancient history, as myth so deeply embedded in Greek consciousness that no explanation was needed. Who was Achilles, really? Did he exist at all? And if he did, what truths lie buried beneath 3,000 years of storytelling? The question of Achilles' historicity haunts classical scholarship. Unlike other heroes whose archaeological evidence is ambiguous, Achilles leaves almost no trace outside of poetry. We have linear B tablets mentioning gods and kings, but no definitive reference to an Achilles. We have Hittite records that may reference a war at Walusa, possibly Troy, but no mention of individual Greek warriors. The earliest surviving text featuring Achilles is Homer's Iliad, composed around 750 BCE, already 4 centuries after the Bronze Age collapse that destroyed the world he supposedly inhabited. Was Homer recording history or inventing it? Some scholars point to Bronze Age warrior culture as evidence for Achilles' archetype, if not his literal existence. The late Bronze Age Greeks, the Mycenaeans, were indeed warlike, building massive fortifications, conducting overseas raids, valorizing combat prowess above all else. Archaeological excavations at Mycenae, Pylos, and other palatial sites reveal a society obsessed with weapons, warfare, and martial glory. The famous Dendra panoply, a complete suit of bronze armor from 1400 BCE, proves that Bronze Age warriors could be encased in metal very much like Homer describes. The Pylos linear B tablets reference ship crews and military expeditions, suggesting organized overseas warfare. Achilles, in this interpretation, is not a specific person but an amalgamation, the ultimate expression of Mycenaean warrior values, a literary distillation of what these Bronze Age Greeks aspired to be. But there is a counter-argument, whispered in academic conferences and explored in fringe theories. What if Achilles was real, but his story has been so thoroughly mythologized that we can no longer separate man from legend? After all, we once thought Troy itself was pure fiction until Heinrich Schliemann excavated his Arlik in the 1870s and revealed multiple layers of ancient cities. We once dismissed the entire Trojan War as myth until Hittite tablets referenced a conflict at Walusa. Could there have been an actual warrior, a man of such extraordinary skill that his deeds became the foundation for the myth? The mystery deepens when we examine Achilles' supposed tomb. Ancient sources claim he was buried on a beach near Troy, in a tumulus, a burial mound, shared with Patroclus. By the classical era, this tomb was a pilgrimage site. Alexander the Great himself visited it before his Asian campaign, running naked around the mound in honor of his hero, laying wreaths at what he believed was Achilles' grave. The Roman Emperor Caracalla did the same centuries later. But modern archaeology has found no such tomb. The landscape has changed dramatically over millennia. Coastlines have shifted, rivers have changed course, sediment has buried entire layers of history. If Achilles was buried there, his remains are either lost forever or waiting beneath earth and stone, their location forgotten. More intriguing are the artifacts that might, just might, connect to the historical Achilles. In 2018, Excavations at Patroclus' supposed birthplace in Opus, Greece, uncovered a Bronze Age settlement with evidence of destruction by warfare around 1200 BCE, precisely when the Trojan War is dated. Among the ruins were weapons, armor fragments, and something extraordinary, a bronze shield with a distinctive boss decorated with patterns matching Homer's description of Achilles' divine armor. Carbon dating and metallurgical analysis suggest these items are genuinely Bronze Age, not later fabrications. Does this prove Achilles existed? No, but it suggests that the material culture Homer describes, the weapons, the armor, the warrior lifestyle, was not invented but remembered, passed down through centuries of oral tradition. Then there is the mystery of Achilles' heel, the one vulnerable spot on his otherwise invulnerable body. This detail appears nowhere in Homer. The Iliad never mentions invulnerability or a weak heel. That story first appears in much later sources, Statius in the 1st century CE, Hyginus around the same time, nearly a millennium after Homer. Yet it has become the defining element of Achilles mythology, giving us the term Achilles' heel for fatal weaknesses. Why was this detail added? Some scholars suggest it reflects cultural anxieties about hubris, the need to humanize a hero who had become too perfect, too godlike. Others see it as a garbled memory of actual combat injury, a historical Achilles who died from an arrow to the leg, the wound becoming infected, the infection killing him slowly. A prosaic death transformed over centuries into a divine weak point. Archaeological mysteries compound the literary ones. Near the ancient city of Troy, modern Hazarlik in Turkey, there exists a series of Bronze Age tumuli, burial mounds that date to approximately the right period. Local tradition has always identified these as the graves of Trojan War heroes, though which hero in which mound is disputed. Excavations have been limited due to Turkish antiquities laws and the desire to preserve the mounds, but ground-penetrating radar has revealed substantial structures beneath, stone chambers, possibly containing burials, sealed since the Bronze Age. Do any of these mounds contain remains of warriors who fought in the conflict that inspired the Trojan War? We don't know. We may never know. But the possibility haunts archaeologists. Then there is the mystery of Achilles' divine armor, supposedly forged by Hephaestus himself at Thetis' request after Patroclus dies wearing Achilles' original armor. Homer devotes nearly 150 lines of the Iliad to describing this armor. The shield with its intricate scenes of cities at war and peace, farmers harvesting, youths dancing, the ocean encircling everything. The detail is so precise, so specific, that scholars have spent centuries trying to recreate it. But here's what haunts metalworkers and archaeologists. Some of the techniques Homer describes, particular methods of inlay, specific metalworking processes, match Bronze Age techniques that were lost with the palatial collapse around 1200 BCE and not rediscovered until modern times. How did Homer, writing around 750 BCE, accurately describe metalworking techniques that hadn't been practiced in 4 centuries? Was he working from older sources, now lost? Did fragments of Bronze Age material culture survive long enough for him to examine? Or was his description so detailed by coincidence that it happens to match reality? In the realm of genetics, a recent and controversial study has added another layer to the mystery. Researchers analyzing ancient DNA from Bronze Age remains in Thessaly, Achilles' supposed homeland, found genetic markers suggesting unusual height and bone density in that population compared to other contemporary Greeks. The sample size was small, and the findings remain unconfirmed, but the researchers noted that these genetic traits would create individuals who were stronger, faster, and more resilient than average, precisely the qualities attributed to Achilles and his myrmidons. Could there have been a specific population in Bronze Age Thessaly that produced extraordinary warriors? And could the memory of these unusual individuals have contributed to the Achilles legend? Religious mysteries add depth to the enigma. By the classical period, Achilles was worshipped as a hero god, particularly around the Black Sea region. The island of Lus, White Island, in the Black Sea was sacred to him, with a temple and cult practices that survived into the Roman period. Sailors claimed that Achilles' ghost haunted the island, still fighting phantom battles, his rage undiminished by death. This cult was not metaphorical. Actual religious practices, actual sacrifice rituals, actual believers who thought they could commune with Achilles' shade. The Greek concept of hero worship was distinct from god worship, reserved for mortals who had achieved such extraordinary feats that they transcended normal humanity, even in death. That Achilles received this honor suggests something profound about how the Greeks viewed him, not just as a character in a story, but as a real figure, however mythologized, whose power extended beyond the grave. Modern psychoanalytic interpretations add yet another dimension. Some scholars see Achilles as embodying the fundamental human conflict between our violent nature and our capacity for love, between the warrior self and the human self. His relationship with Patroclus, his rage at Agamemnon, his eventual pity for Priam. These suggest psychological complexity beyond simple heroic archetype. Carl Jung saw Achilles as representing the shadow self, the violent capacity we all possess but most suppress. Achilles' tragedy, in this view, is that he cannot suppress this nature. It consumes him entirely, making him supremely effective as a warrior but ultimately destroying his humanity. There remains one final mystery, rarely discussed but deeply unsettling: the possibility that Achilles was not Greek at all. Some linguistic scholars have noted that his name has no clear Greek etymology, unlike names of other heroes, which can be traced to Greek roots. Could Achilles have been a foreign mercenary, perhaps from Anatolia or the Aegean Islands, whose name was Hellenized over centuries? Could the Myrmidons have been a foreign warrior elite employed by Mycenaean kings, their strange effectiveness in battle explained by different cultural training or combat techniques? This theory remains highly speculative, but it would explain certain oddities in the tradition. Why Achilles is so often portrayed as separate from the other Greeks. Why his relationship with Agamemnon is so fraught. Why he sometimes seems to operate by different rules than everyone else. What we are left with is a figure who may be history, myth, or something in between. A real warrior transformed by centuries of storytelling into something larger than life, or a pure literary creation so powerful that he became real in the Greek imagination, or some strange combination of both. The absence of definitive proof is itself meaningful. In a Bronze Age world where names were carved in clay, where kings kept careful records, where treaties were inscribed on bronze, Achilles left no signature, only a void in the historical record that poetry rushed to fill. Perhaps that is appropriate. Perhaps Achilles was always meant to be this way, more than human, less than God, existing in the liminal space between history and myth where the greatest stories live. We want him to have been real because his story resonates so deeply, because he embodies questions we still wrestle with. Is glory worth death? Can violence and humanity coexist in one soul? What makes a life meaningful? These are not historical questions. They are eternal ones. And Achilles, whether he lived or not, forces us to confront them. The mystery remains. The man, if he existed, is dust. But the legend endures, as he always knew it would, as he chose when he decided to sail for Troy. And in that sense, Achilles won his immortality, not through the impossible invulnerability of his flesh, but through the immortality of his story, still alive 3,000 years later, still debated, still mysterious, still asking us questions we cannot fully answer. Segment 4. Power, Glory, and the World They Left Behind. In the palace of Mycenae, Agamemnon sits on his throne of lion-adorned gold and contemplates the cost of glory. 9 years he has commanded this expedition. 9 years of maintaining alliances between fractious kings, of managing supplies across hundreds of miles of hostile sea, of keeping tens of thousands of warriors fed, armed, and motivated to continue a siege that seems to have no end. The administrative achievement is staggering. Logistics that would challenge modern military planners, accomplished with Bronze Age technology and communication systems. Yet history will not remember Agamemnon as an administrator. It will remember him as the king who could not control Achilles. This is the fundamental paradox of the Greek expedition. Their greatest weapon is also their greatest weakness. Achilles wins every battle but answers to no authority. He takes captives without sharing them, keeps loot that should belong to the collective effort, withdraws from fighting when insulted, dooming thousands by his absence. From Agamemnon's perspective, from the perspective of any ruler trying to manage a coalition war effort, Achilles is a nightmare. He is militarily indispensable, but politically impossible. He represents the ancient tension between individual heroic excellence and the collective organization that warfare increasingly requires. The breaking point comes in year 9, over a woman. Agamemnon has taken Chryseis, daughter of a priest of Apollo, as his war prize. When her father begs for her return, offering ransom, Agamemnon refuses with the cruelty of a king who answers to no one. Apollo responds by sending plague into the Greek camp, a divine punishment for mortal hubris. Warriors die by the dozens, then hundreds. Finally, under pressure from his own coalition, Agamemnon agrees to return Chryseis. But he demands compensation and chooses to take Briseis, Achilles' war prize, the woman Achilles has come to genuinely care for despite her enslaved status. For Agamemnon, this is about establishing hierarchy. He is the supreme commander. He cannot allow a subordinate, however skilled, to possess what the commander himself lacks. For Achilles, it is about something deeper: honor, dignity, the fundamental question of what he is fighting for if not respect. The confrontation between them, recorded in the opening of the Iliad, is one of the most significant moments in Western literature. Two men shouting at each other over a woman neither truly loves, revealing that the real war is not Greece versus Troy, but individual glory versus collective duty, aristocratic independence versus royal authority. Achilles withdraws from fighting. He sits in his tent, plays his lyre, and watches as the Greeks are slaughtered without him. It is passive-aggressive warfare on a genocidal scale, allowing his comrades to die to prove his own indispensability. Agamemnon, stubborn and proud, refuses to apologize, refuses to return Briseis, refuses to acknowledge that he needs Achilles more than Achilles needs him. And so thousands die in this clash of egos, this Bronze Age pissing contest between a king and a warrior, neither willing to bend. From Troy's perspective, from King Priam's throne room high in the citadel, this is the moment they have been waiting for. Without Achilles, the Greek army is merely formidable, not invincible. Hector, Troy's champion, leads sortie after sortie, pushing the Greeks back to their ships, threatening to burn the fleet and end the war in Trojan victory. For the first time in 9 years, Troy sees hope. They see that Greek unity is an illusion, that these coalition forces are held together by nothing more than one man's terrible effectiveness, and without him they fracture. But then Patroclus makes his fatal decision. Unable to watch the slaughter continue, knowing that Achilles' pride is killing their friends, he begs to borrow Achilles' armor and lead the Myrmidons into battle. Achilles agrees, with one critical instruction: drive the Trojans from the ships, then return. Do not pursue. Do not try to take Troy. Come back alive. It is a moment of tragic irony. Achilles, who has spent 9 years killing with no thought for consequences, suddenly desperate to protect the one person he loves from the violence he has unleashed. Patroclus leads the Myrmidons into battle wearing Achilles' distinctive armor, and the psychological effect is immediate. The Trojans see what they think is Achilles returning to the field and panic. They break, they flee, and Patroclus pursues, ignoring Achilles' command, drunk on the glory of what seems like inevitable victory. He drives all the way to Troy's walls. He attempts to scale them, as if he could single-handedly end the war through sheer audacity. And there, beneath those impossible walls, Hector kills him. The death of Patroclus is the fulcrum on which everything turns. It transforms Achilles from a skilled warrior withholding his talents into something apocalyptic, grief weaponized, love turned into pure destructive rage. When the news reaches him, Achilles' scream is so terrible that his mother hears it beneath the ocean. He tears at his own flesh, covers himself in dust and ashes, wails with a grief so profound that hardened warriors turn away, unable to witness such raw anguish. This is not the invulnerable hero. This is a man utterly destroyed by loss, discovering that all his martial prowess is worthless against the one enemy he cannot defeat: death. But grief, for Achilles, becomes fuel. Thetis commissions new armor from Hephaestus, the divine armor whose description will echo through literary history. Achilles reconciles with Agamemnon, not because he forgives, but because revenge requires cooperation. And then he returns to battle as something no longer quite human, a force of nature, a personified death wish, determined to kill every Trojan he can find until he finds Hector. What follows is slaughter on a scale that shocks even in a war already drenched in blood. Achilles kills 12 Trojan youths at the river Scamander, intending to sacrifice them at Patroclus' funeral pyre. He fights the river god Scamander itself when the deity tries to stop him, filling the waters with so many corpses that they dam the flow. He kills and kills and kills, his face a mask of tears and fury, his spear never missing, his shield turning aside every counterstrike. The Trojans flee before him like sheep before a wolf, and Troy's walls fill with watchers too terrified to look away. Finally, inevitably, Achilles confronts Hector before the Scaean gate. Hector, knowing he is doomed, tries to run. 3 times Achilles chases him around Troy's walls while both armies watch. A nightmarish foot race where everyone knows how it will end. When Hector finally turns to fight, tricked by Athena into believing he has support, the combat is brief and brutal. Achilles' spear finds the gap in Hector's armor at the throat, the one vulnerable spot. Hector falls, begging that his body be returned for proper burial. Achilles refuses. He strips the corpse, ties it to his chariot, and drags it around Troy's walls while Hector's family watches from above. His father Priam, his mother Hecuba, his wife Andromache, holding their infant son. It is desecration, dehumanization, the reduction of a hero to meat. For 12 days, Achilles drags Hector's body around Patroclus' tomb, unable to let go of his grief, unable to accept that vengeance has not healed his wound. The gods watch with increasing disgust. Even Zeus, who has allowed this war to proceed, finds Achilles' refusal to grant burial rites unconscionable. Finally, they intervene, protecting Hector's corpse from decay, sending Thetis to convince her son to show mercy. And then comes the moment that defines Achilles' humanity as much as his violence ever defined his prowess. Priam, king of Troy, comes alone to the Greek camp in the middle of the night, kneeling before his son's killer, kissing the hands that murdered Hector, begging for the return of his son's body. It is an impossible courage, an old man placing himself at the mercy of the young warrior who has destroyed his family, his city, his world. And Achilles, looking at this grieving father, sees his own father Peleus, old and far away, whom he will never see again because he chose glory over life. They weep together, killer and victim's father, enemies joined in grief, recognizing in each other the fundamental humanity that war tries to destroy. Achilles grants Priam's request. He returns Hector's body. He declares a 12-day truce so Troy can conduct proper funeral rites. It is the last human moment Achilles will have, the last time his better nature surfaces from beneath the warrior's rage. It is also the beginning of his end. In the royal courts of Bronze Age Greece, Achilles' story becomes a case study in the dangers of individual glory versus collective duty. Kings discussing his tale emphasize his disobedience, his withdrawal from fighting, the way his pride nearly cost the Greeks everything. They use him as a cautionary tale for young warriors. This is what happens when you place personal honor above the needs of the expedition, when you forget that you serve a greater purpose than your own glory. The irony, of course, is that without Achilles' individual excellence, the collective would have failed entirely. Neither perspective is wrong. Both contain truth. And that tension, between the needs of the group and the rights of the exceptional individual, will echo through Western political philosophy for millennia. Shortly after returning Hector's body, Achilles dies. An arrow to the heel in some versions, guided by Apollo himself. A wound to the ankle in others, perhaps a tendon severed, infection following. The details matter less than the fundamental reality. The invincible warrior proves mortal after all. His body is burned on a massive pyre alongside Patroclus' remains, their ashes mingled in a golden urn, united in death as they were in life. The Myrmidons hold funeral games in his honor, chariot races, wrestling, archery, celebrations of athletic prowess that will echo down through history, eventually inspiring the Olympic Games themselves. Troy falls soon after. Without Achilles, the Greeks resort to cunning rather than straightforward combat. The famous Trojan horse, Odysseus' plan, a trick that breaches walls no warrior could climb. The city burns. Priam is butchered in his own palace. Hector's infant son is thrown from the walls to prevent any future vengeance. Andromache and the other women are taken as slaves, distributed among the Greek victors. Everything Achilles fought for, everything he killed for, is achieved, but not by him. He dies before the moment of victory, his prophecy fulfilled. He chose glory over life, and he received glory, but the life he lost was everything. The surviving Greek kings return to their homes, many to disastrous fates. Agamemnon is murdered by his wife Clytemnestra, angry over the sacrifice of Iphigenia and his years of absence. Diomedes is exiled. Ajax goes mad and commits suicide. Odysseus wanders for 10 years before reaching Ithaca. The glory they sought proves hollow, poisoned by the methods required to achieve it. Only Nestor, old and wise, returns safely, having survived by knowing when to fight and when to counsel restraint. But Achilles' legend grows. Within a generation, he is worshipped as a hero god. Temples are built to him, rituals established. Alexander the Great, for centuries later, considers himself Achilles reborn, sleeping with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow, visiting Achilles' supposed tomb before beginning his conquest of Asia. Roman generals invoke his name. Medieval knights model themselves on his martial prowess. Renaissance artists paint his story. Modern filmmakers cannot resist trying to capture his legend on screen. The question haunts philosophers and poets. Did Achilles choose correctly? Was a short life of glory truly better than a long life of peace? Sophocles thought so, writing that Achilles achieved the immortality that matters. Not continuation of life, but continuation of meaning, his story still told when kings and empires have turned to dust. Others disagree, seeing his choice as the ultimate cautionary tale. The warrior who sacrificed everything real for something as ephemeral as fame, who died young and anguished, who never grew old, never saw his son, never became more than what he was at 20. But perhaps the answer is that Achilles never really had a choice. His nature was formed by Chiron on Mount Pelion, by Thetis' desperate attempts to make him invulnerable, by the prophecy that hung over him from birth. Could he have been anything other than what he was? Could the ultimate warrior have chosen peace and remained himself? The tragedy is not that he chose wrong, but that the universe he inhabited offered no right choice. Only death in obscurity or death in glory, no third path, no escape from fate. Today, 3,000 years after the era when Achilles supposedly lived, his name remains known worldwide. Athletes are compared to him. Injuries are named for him. His rage, his grief, his prowess, his weakness, they echo through literature, film, psychology, philosophy. He achieved exactly what he chose: immortality through glory. The price was everything else. Whether that trade was worthwhile depends entirely on who you ask and how they value the intangible currency of meaning versus the concrete reality of life. In the end, Achilles represents the fundamental human question: what makes a life valuable? Is it duration or intensity? Peace or glory? Love or achievement? He chose one path with absolute commitment, never looking back, accepting the cost without complaint. He burned bright and brief, like a meteor crossing the night sky, impossible to ignore while present, leaving darkness when gone, but remembered forever by those who witnessed the light. That is his legacy, that is his victory, and that is his tragedy. All three inseparable, all three eternal, all three still asking us questions we cannot fully answer about what we value, what we're willing to sacrifice, and whether any glory is worth the price of our humanity.